Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you may watch or listen to this, Mizzou fans. Gabe DeArmond here with the Yuengling opponent preview show for a fairly significant week for the Missouri Tigers. Alabama, Mizzou, 11 a.m. on Saturday, ABC at Faurot Field. Our preview and post-game shows all year long brought to you, as always, by our friends and partners at America's oldest brewery, that is Yuengling. Had some last weekend. Hope you guys have some this weekend. Pre-game may be a little bit tough with an 11 a.m. kickoff, but plenty of time after the game for you to pick up some Yuengling, whether it's the flight, the lager, whatever your preference is, and either celebrate or drown your sorrows, but appreciate Yuengling for being partners with us on the pregame and postgame shows all year long. And with that, I'm going to bring in this week's guest. That is Alex Scarborough from Bama 24/7, covers the Tide for the 24/7 Sports Network. Alex, appreciate you joining us, man.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
So first things first, I understand that Alabama and its fans probably look at this series a little bit differently than Missouri fans have over the years. This the spread opened at about 6. It's down to 3. Does that surprise you?
A little bit. I think part of it is probably looking at the analytics of things and seeing that Alabama has some weak spots and that Missouri obviously has put up some good numbers early in the season and probably based off of that. And I still think there are skeptics with Alabama. I think there's still a hangover from that Florida State game, and it's interesting. You hear fans sort of gripe about it, like, "Oh, I thought the narrative would flip when we beat Georgia, and it didn't flip, and I thought the narrative would flip when we beat Vanderbilt, and it didn't flip." Well, you lose like that in week one, and I think people are still going to hold on to it for a while. So
Right.
a little surprised it's moved that far down, but at the end of the day, I think you're talking about two really good football teams and Alabama having to go on the road, which is always difficult in the SEC.
Well, the lesson to be learned here, I mean, if Alabama's being disrespected, no school in the country gets the respect it's due, right? But Eli Drinkwood said this week, look, this isn't the same team that played Florida State. I mean, I'm sure you guys are tired of talking about it, but before we kind of get to this, what happened in that one?
I think Alabama. Well, I know what happened is Alabama got punched in the mouth and they didn't know how to respond. And I think
Yeah.
the underlying issue with that was I think there was all off season a lot of positivity around how much leadership had sort of developed behind the scenes with players, coaches, the coaching staff being in year two and able to be more difficult with those guys and have more difficult conversations. And they really thought, hey, we're ready to go. And the first time trouble hit, they were not ready to go. And if you watch that Alabama sideline in that game, they were looking for somebody else to step up instead of simply doing it themselves. So coming out of that game, it was a gut check moment and a moment where, I talked to Kalen DeBoer about this one-on-one, like him having to realize that I need to do something a little bit different because by nature, he is more of a reserved coach, wants to be the guy who just provides that steady, calm demeanor. And he realized, wait, they need a little bit of fire and brimstone from me. And that really lit a fire under these guys and to where you started seeing the effort that you need because look, Alabama's talent, we can talk about talent composite and all the, preseason all SEC picks. Talent means nothing in football if you don't bring your guts, if you don't bring effort, if you don't bring intensity. And I think that's what we've seen from Alabama these last few weeks is that part of it is matching the talent they have on the field and they're figuring out who they are in terms of their identity on both sides of the football. And it may not be a perfect program by any means on both sides of the ball, but they're figuring out ways to win games and rally in difficult moments, which obviously we saw them fall flat on their face week one. So they've really turned a corner in that respect.
Yeah, our listeners and readers are probably tired of this analogy from me because I've used it about 9 different times this week, but Alabama obviously way better than I do. You tell me if this is completely off base. I am a lifelong Kansas City Chiefs fan. There were a few years where opposing teams were scared to death for Patrick Mahomes to have the ball with 5 minutes left
Mhm.
because they knew they were losing. There were a lot of years, and Missouri played Alabama in a few of these years, where Alabama had like a 2-score lead coming off the bus.
Yeah.
It was Alabama, and there was this aura, and we don't have a chance against them. I don't think this Alabama team is necessarily worse than those Alabama teams were by much, but like I feel like the aura, the fear of invincibility is gone a little bit. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, we've got two quarterbacks who have talked smacked about Alabama this season so far, and they're 1-1. I mean,
Well,
Tommy
I mean,
Costello.
Diego Pavia talks smack about everybody, so
Yeah,
you
I
kind of
mean, but
discount that one.
but it's free reign, right?
Mhm.
I think when even before Nick Saban left, there was a little bit of like, hey, it's different and we can kind of go after them. But when that happened and there was the coaching change, it gave everybody license. And then last season, what we saw, it was proof that hey, it is different and they're not invincible anymore. They lost at Vanderbilt, and that was a much better Vanderbilt team than I think anybody knew at the time. But when you're talking about losing to the worst team in the SEC for decades, a team you hadn't lost to for more than 4 decades, and I think that is the moment where it was like, okay, it's the fear factor is gone. Now it's just about playing football. Now it's just about who's got better scheme, who's got better players, all of those things. And it's interesting because the way opponents take Alabama is going to be different. But I also think there's a flip side of that I think Alabama players are sort of like a little bit pissed off by it, a little bit like,
Yeah.
look, we've got something to prove that all these shots you're taking at us, you're going to have to pay for those. Now, can they regain it? I think once it's gone for the most part, that aura you're talking about. But I definitely think you're right about that. Teams come into Tuscaloosa feeling differently. Teams, welcome Alabama feeling differently now. I don't think there's any question about that. And some of that's Saban, some of that's the way they've played, some of that's the way college football has changed. But there's no doubt that that's the case for sure.
So obviously the important part here is, hey, Saturday morning, 11 a.m. in this matchup. So I view this as strength on relative weakness on both sides of the ball. And I want to start when Missouri has the football. And like I understand a lot of Alabama, a lot of people outside of Columbia look at this and say, yeah, but who have they played? And that is a fair point with Missouri. They have not played one of the better schedules in America. They do have the leading rusher in the country. Alabama has been vulnerable to that at times. Like, what's your view of Alabama's run defense versus Missouri's running game?
Scary, in a word, because we were reporting a podcast for our site this morning, and it's like you want to feel better if you're an Alabama fan about what you saw the second half against Vanderbilt because they turned the
Mhm.
corner. But I don't think you can forget what you saw in the first half. I don't think you can forget what you saw the first 4 games of the season, which was missed assignments, guys in the wrong gaps, and missed tackles. A lot of them. There's at least 2 or 3 games where they had double-digit missed tackles, and they've got players in the front seven who are still sort of feeling their way through things. Tim Keenan, I think, is still with that tightrope ankle surgery, still working his way where he needs to be. The linebacker core has underperformed a little bit to this point. Deontay Lawson, not the player we saw a year ago before the injury, still working his way back, and just not having elite talent in the front seven. If we're just being honest about it, they don't. They don't have a bunch of guys who you say, man, that guy's going to be a first round pick. LT Overton, their star defensive end, is probably that guy. But if you look at his numbers right now, not really flashing in that respect. So they are vulnerable. And the thing that makes them more vulnerable than just like you're talking about, the running back versus the front side, it's the fact that you can also throw a dual threat quarterback on top of it. And Eli Drinkwitz, what he likes to do in terms of moving the quarterback around, in terms of misdirection, and all of those things are things that have crushed Alabama, not just this year, but last year, and really you can go back further than that. So it's a question to me of how much did Alabama solve in that second half with what Vanderbilt did, and how much of it is, hey, we just kind of got a little bit fortunate that Vanderbilt went away from the running game. I think we're going to find out from an Alabama perspective in a really big way how good their rush defense is, because if I'm testing it all game long. I don't care if I'm down 7, 8, 12, 14 points. I think that's your path to success.
That was my thing. Just that Vanderbilt game, I thought you're in a 7 point or a 9 point game. You don't.
Mhm.
Why did you only run the ball 19 times? Like I understand Alabama was
Mhm.
better in the second half, but at the same time, like you didn't need some miracle of three
Mhm.
scores in 10 minutes to come back.
Yeah, it's coaches sort of chase ghosts a little bit
Yep.
sometimes, and I think that's a little bit of what happened, that they got a little bit away from their game plan. And it happens to a lot of teams, but it was interesting to me given what we know Diego Pavia can do with the ball in his hands, but also with what Alexander, their running back, had done prior in that game. Like I said, I have a feeling that Missouri won't fall victim to that, and I think they're going to test Alabama over and over and over again. And I think one guy, if you want to watch, it's interesting. We talk about the running game in the front seven. To me, in some ways, it trickles down or up to the safeties and what they're going to do. Bray Hubbard is a guy who will put his nose in the box and can make plays. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to have to help in run defense. But then on the flip side of that is, how much are you leaving Keon Sabb back there as your center fielder? How much is he on an island? And can you get hurt with play action potentially if they want to go that route? But yeah, Alabama still has things on tape that they need to answer for. It's something Kane Womack, their defensive coordinator, has talked about a lot about this season, and something that they're going to continue to have to show, not just this week, but week after week after week.
Talking with Alex Scarborough from Bama 24/7. And so you kind of led into it. Look, let's say Alabama does have some success slowing down Ahmad Hardy, slowing down the run game. I think the strength of this Alabama defense is viewed as the secondary.
Mhm.
Um, if Missouri has to throw the ball to beat this Alabama team, do you think that is? I don't think it's what Missouri wants to
Yeah.
do. Do you think it's doable?
Not on its own. No, you're going to have some balance. But I will say this: Alabama's secondary, and I don't know if Alabama fans tune into this; they'll get angry with me. They've underperformed, I think, a little bit to this point, and they honestly have not been tested. If you look at the number of pass attempts that have been made against them, it's in the lower third, lower quarter of the FBS. Um, Damani Jackson, their star cornerback, has had some sort of missteps, got burned against Georgia a couple of different times. Zabian Brown, who I think is going to be a 10-year All-Pro, still has moments. And Keon Sabb is another one of those guys coming back from injury that he made a play against Vanderbilt, had an interception, has, I believe, a tackle for loss if it wasn't a sack, has made some plays, but also hasn't been the player we thought he was a year ago. So to me, look, Alabama still got bodies. Dijon Lee, one of the best freshman cornerbacks in the country. But I don't think they're invulnerable yet. I don't think they've shown that. And especially with what I think Kane is going to have to do in terms of having to supplement not just defending the run. Alabama doesn't have a wealth of pass rushers either. So they're going to have to try to turn up the heat on the quarterback. And what that does, obviously, is leaves your cornerbacks on an island. So I don't think if you're Drinkwitz, you're saying, hey, we're going to throw the ball 40 times in this game.
Right.
But I think you should take your shots, especially at home, and test those guys on the outside, because you might be able to find some success, more success than I would have thought going into the season based on what Alabama had on paper. They're not bad. They're still good, but I don't think they've nearly lived up to the potential what some folks thought they would be.
It's fascinating because when each team has the ball, this game is almost completely opposite to me. I mean, you're talking about Alabama's safeties have to help in the run. I've said this week, Corey Batoon should tell his safeties if they make a tackle in the run game, they're going to be fined or have to do push-ups on the field, because Missouri's safeties have spent all season sprinting to the line of scrimmage. And what that results in is they don't give up much, but when they give up something, it's this big play. And facing Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Ty Simpson's playing as well as anybody. So do you agree that this is Alabama's biggest edge in this game is that passing game?
Yeah, and honestly, I think it could be their edge in almost every game they play in, because
Yeah.
their receiver core is that good. Look, Ryan Williams, it's been well documented here. I don't know how much it's made the rounds. Like, he's underperformed this year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The catches. But if you take a step back, if Ryan Williams is your third best receiver, It's a pretty good spot to be.
Like I looked at the stats this morning, and based on what I'd heard about Ryan Williams, I expected him to be having this awful year, and like he's still having a fine year.
Yes, he's still explosive. It's just consistency. But the thing is, what that does for a defensive coordinator is it still scares you. You're still like, man, that guy can take the top off of defense. Oh, by the way, Jeremy Bernard might be the best receiver in the country that nobody's talking about. Isaiah Horton, 6'5", transferred from Miami, is making plays. Lazir Brooks, the freshman, number 17, looks like a young Jalen Waddle out there. They've got a lot of depth. If I was Missouri, I would let Alabama run, because that's the flip side of this is Alabama's running game. I know Jam Miller put up 130 yards against Vanderbilt. He avoided 2 tackles in that game, 2. That's his testament to scheme. Props to Ryan Grubb. That's a testament to the offensive line. Props to those guys. But he's not a missed tackle machine. He's never really been that guy. And they kind of lacked explosive plays in the running game, whether you're talking about him, Kevin Riley, who's your definitive number 2 back at this point. They're not a team Alabama has not shown on paper to be explosive running the football. And if I'm Missouri, I'm banking on that. And I'm saying, look, if Jam runs for 100 yards, I can live with that. I don't want Ty Simpson throwing for 400 yards, because that can very realistically happen with what Alabama's doing in terms of their depth at receiver. And oh, by the way, Josh Cuevas is a pretty good tight end on top of that. You know, he's not Travis Kelce or anything out there, but he does make plays and makes you account for it. And to the level of football Ty Simpson's playing at, being able to spread the ball all the way around the field, you are going to need your safeties to make plays in the passing game. I don't know that you necessarily need them in the running game.
Yeah. So I have said, like, if this becomes a Ty Simpson gets to sit in the pocket and it's Alabama's receivers against Missouri's secondary, like Missouri's cooked. They can't win that game. So the way you win the pass defense game is you get pressure on Ty Simpson with a front four that has been pretty good this year, has 2 defensive ends among the national leaders in pressure rate. I know Alabama's offensive line is viewed as having a world of potential that it maybe hasn't completely lived up to. Is that accurate?
Yeah, not even. I was going to say not even close. They've had moments.
Okay.
Look, They did well against Georgia. The interesting thing with Alabama's offensive line is I don't know who the starting 5 is every single time they go out there. They've been rotating heavily. Caden Proctor's made these plays outside of playing left tackle, but he's given up some pressure.
He's not a lineman. He's just a running back now.
Yeah, he's like a jumbo running back, jumbo receiver. I don't know what he is, but he's been a little bit leaky at times. Wilkin Formby, their right tackle, has been a little bit leaky at times, and that's why you've seen the true freshman Michael Carroll come out there, and they've kicked Wilkin Formby inside to offensive guard these last 2 games to right guard. I think that's a really interesting scenario for Alabama that I would lean on if I was them. But they've got sort of little issues there, and 4 sacks by Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's got a pretty good defensive line as well, but still 4 is not a number you wanted to see. You didn't want to see Ty running around quite as much as he did. So it's Alabama's offensive line has the potential. I just don't think it's a unit that you take for granted every single week and say they're going to stand up. I think they've got to continue to show that, especially going on the road and especially given the number of guys they throw out there. Because again, you're talking about putting a true freshman at right tackle. How is he going to perform on the road? Talk about William Sanders, a guy who's barely played before this year, coming in and playing significant minutes. And oh, by the way, this week they're talking about, maybe you bring Jaden Roberts back into it, your preseason all SEC guard who hasn't barely played a lick all year. Suddenly, is he back in the rotation? There's all those moving parts. And to me, again, like if you need to turn those guys upfield and you say, man, if we get killed a little bit in the run game, so be it. I think the key is you got to get to Ty, but you also have to keep Ty in the pocket because he does have the legs to beat you. But if I'm Eli, I'm saying let's go get the quarterback, because if you give Ty time with these receivers, they're going to get open, and he's shown that he's going to find them.
Yeah, 100%. If he gets to sit back in the pocket and survey the field, Missouri can't win this game. So, I don't love putting guys on the spot and saying, give me a prediction. I don't care if you want to do it. Feel free and make one side or the other mad. That's your call. But I always kind of ask, okay, just fill in the blank. Alabama wins if, Alabama loses if.
Alabama wins if they have no turnovers. I think that's sort of the key because I do think the defense is probably going to struggle a little bit to stop the run. So I think it's incumbent on keeping possession. Alabama loses if that does happen. And I think if Ahmad Hardy has a day and you can't get Ty Simpson the football. And that was, I think, the interesting comment that Kalen DeBoer made with the podcast Busting with the Boys was like, man, they can time a possession you to death where you don't have the football. And I think that's the nightmare scenario for Alabama is if you're continually getting gashed in the running game and you can't get the ball to your best players, which is Ty Simpson and those receivers. I still like Alabama in this game. I haven't given a final prediction, but I've been saying a little all offseason, like to me, this was the trap game of all trap games because of where it fell, the 11 a.m. kickoff, all of those things. I don't know if it qualifies because Mizzou's obviously a good team and ranked,
Right.
but I still think there's an element to me that Alabama has to show every week that they're going to bring it, especially coming off two really emotional games. It's weird to say because Vanderbilt doesn't make any sense in that scenario
Right.
if you fell asleep for the last year. But coming off those two emotional games with Georgia and Vanderbilt, like how are they going to respond? I think Alabama has to start fast and has to figure out a way to put up points and try to take the running game out of the equation. If they can do that, they're going to be really successful. If they can't, it might be a little bit of a slog.
Yep. Alex, appreciate your time, man. Good to catch up, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you.
All right, that is Alex Scarborough. Bama 24/7 covers the Crimson Tide for our network. And want to remind you guys, part of being on the 24/7 network, if you go to their site, you can read the message board, you can read the stories. You can't post and be a troll, but you can at least see what they're saying about the game and the matchup and all of that. Appreciate you guys hanging out here with us. Once again, we are brought to you preview and post-game shows all year long by Yuengling, America's oldest brewery. Make sure to check them out. The green bottle, the traditional lager, they've got it in cans now, the flight, whatever it is you want. Pick up a couple for pregame and more than a couple for postgame on Saturday. Our postgame show should be live somewhere around 3:30, something like that, Saturday afternoon. Cody Goodwin and I will be breaking it all down. Thanks for hanging out. Like, comment, share, subscribe, do all those things until 11 o'clock Wednesday night. Join us over at powermizzou.com for 50% off your first year. We'll talk to you next time.